I've been working on is every time I ship something out into the world, even if it's super well received or not, I just am like, I did a thing, keep going. I did a thing, keep going. Like, just keep going. Just keep producing, keep writing, keep shipping, keep sharing. There's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's essentially like, your job is to just focus on doing the work. You have no ownership of the fruits of your work.
This week, I am very excited to share part of my conversation with Kelly Wilde Miller, who is an emerging writer and speaker advocating for authentic self-expression. Now, funnily enough, I've had both Kelly and her husband on the podcast now, and both of those conversations were incredibly impactful for me and for loads of people in the audience for very different reasons. So I'm really excited to share this with you. Kelly famously now got a challenge to both write and publish her first book in just 5 days. She's also an award-winning speaker and the creator of the growing newsletter Wild on Purpose. So in this part, you're going to hear Kelly and I talking about the lessons that we've learned from missed opportunities. We talk about the ways that we can sometimes get in our own way and subconsciously self-sabotage. We talk about the value of early business experiences and generally just the idea that as you grow and as you develop, you go through multiple try-fail cycles. You try something, you fail, you try again. You're continually pushing the boundaries, finding your agency and discovering the thing that really makes you tick and the things that you really care about or are passionate about or have some talent or skills in. Kelly has definitely been on that journey, and I shared some of my experiences with that as well. We talk about finding the balance as a writer or as a creator between your creativity and stability. We talk about the weight of success in writing. We talk about the concept of a shadow self and the kind of unlived life that very often hangs around in the background as you continue progressing in your life or career and as you try to explore, and how we should deal with that and how we deal with, the shadow of our dreams and the things we once wanted to accomplish, and being able to wrestle with the sense of identity that we find in our careers as we grow and as we develop. So it was a really engaging conversation. I know that so many of you are going to love this. You can find the full show notes, the transcript, and read my newsletter at theknowledge.io. And you can find Kelly online on Twitter at Kelly C. Wilde. Her website is kellywildemiller.com, and we'll have links to her book, Creative Dysregulation. We'll have the links in the description and in the show notes. And if you love this episode, please do share it with a friend. And don't forget to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because it helps us tremendously to find other listeners just like you. Probably where I'd start is, when I was preparing for this conversation, I think I was doing some research and looking into some of your work and some of your background, etc. And your life seems to be, it's funny, I think sometimes I have friends that will say, oh, it feels like I've lived many lifetimes in my life so far. And these are people that obviously haven't met you, because your life feels a bit like a Sundance movie. And so I thought that might be a good place to start. And then we can kind of go from there towards a lot more of the creative aspects.
I love that so much. Let's do it.
Okay. So I've heard you mention that you were kind of like a straight A student that fell through the cracks of life and ended up waitressing at a 50s style diner. And then at some point you end up working at the most magical place on earth, but not quite inside, kind of Disney Quest, somewhere on the outside or nearby. So I'd love to know the journey of getting to there. Maybe we could start from, I'm not sure what your parents might have did for work, or was there any impetus in your background of pushing you towards a particular type of career or to consider a particular type of thing?
Well, first of all, great job. That's a lot of research. I can tell that you've actually dug deep. Where would be a great place to start? So yeah, I was actually essentially born in the heart of Silicon Valley in the late 80s. And so my mom specifically was really kind of influenced by what was happening with all the startups around Google and Microsoft, and really felt this electricity around the tech boom that was happening. But simultaneously, there was a lot of personal things happening in my family. My parents got divorced. The Bay Area became unbelievably expensive to live in. Although from an energetic perspective, my mom, who's very entrepreneurial at heart, felt a lot of that excitement. She ended up making the choice to move me and her up to Sacramento, California, which was more or less the suburbs, a lot less excitement, really quiet, just suburban living. I do reflect back of what what would have been for my life and trajectory had we stayed in the San Francisco Bay Area. And if I had truly grown up fully immersed in that type of electricity energy. But instead, we moved kind of to the suburbs, and my earliest years were very devoted to dance and the performing arts. I got a really cool high school experience. So from 7th grade to 12th grade, I went to a performing and fine arts charter school. So kind of like imagine high school. I think it's a High School Musical, that the movie. Like I actually lived that where students were just singing in the hallways and it was incredible. So we had performance artists, visual artists, digital artists. We didn't have any sports whatsoever. So as the dancer, like I was the sports team. And that was such a beautiful way to be exposed to kind of a creative, just creativity in general. But at some point along the line, I picked up the programming that the arts were not a viable career and that I actually needed to start positioning myself to study finance or business. And I was a straight A student, like you mentioned. I graduated third in my class with a 4.2 GPA. And school was always very easy for me. It was really my happy place, which in hindsight, I realized was because my home was not as much of a happy place. And I was very lonely at home because it really was just me and my mom, and she worked very much full time. Even from kindergarten, I actually have my box of childhood things. My mom gave me everything from my childhood. And I was looking back on some of my report cards from kindergarten and first grade, and I was already getting top marks and positioned for leadership and whatnot. And so I really thrived in school, but things started getting really derailed right around the time that I needed to apply for colleges. And despite graduating at the top of my class, which in California, if you graduate in the top 5% of your high school, you're actually guaranteed admittance into the California UC system. So that's UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, Santa Cruz. You don't necessarily get the school of your choice, but you'll at least get into a school. And with the grades I had, it was reasonable to assume I could have gotten into one of the better schools. However, right when I was starting to apply and take that seriously, my mother said, "You're not going to a four-year college. You're going to go to junior college just like I did, and I won't co-sign on any loans." And we had no money to send me out to college. And what happened, there was a whole breaking point there for me where instead of asking for help from my high school counselors or teachers or other parents, I took my mom's word as the word. And I just stopped. I just stopped applying myself. I dropped out of AP calculus. I started partying more. And I just said, okay, well, if that's what my mom says I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do. That intrinsic disempowerment is what I've been healing for the past 14 years or so. And it's what I believe children and youth need the most is a deep sense of empowered ability to make their own choices and to know what is best for them and to feel empowered to go ask for help when obstacles come up. And so instead of going to a 4-year university, I went to junior college. I was waitressing at that 50s style diner, partying a lot, dating a man 10 years older than me. I'm 19, dating a 29-year-old, which just feels insane now looking back on that. And I was sort of struck one day with this future vision that if nothing were to change, I was probably going to be married by 21 with 3 kids by 25 and maybe an AA degree, just like an associate's degree, and work a front desk as a receptionist. Not that there's anything wrong with that path, but I've always known that there was more for me. My first dream in life was to be a Rockette on Broadway. So I've always sort of shot for the stars. My second dream was to be an astronomer. So literally I was going for the stars. And so when that knowing struck me that I need to make a change ASAP, I broke up with my partner and I got an internship at Walt Disney World, not Disneyland, because I wanted to get as far away from home as possible. So I didn't want to just go to Southern California. So I went to the other side of the country to Florida and worked at Disney World. And then the second major sort of turning point an important turning point was growing up as a dancer. It was very clear that I could get into the performance side of Disney World, the parades or the shows or something. There's so many performers there. I knew I wasn't going to be a princess. That's everybody's first follow-up question is, which princess were you? And I was too tall to be a princess and my face is not symmetrical enough. These are the things I actually look for. But I at least was like, I could totally be in the parades. And I had one shot to audition on the West Coast. And the day of the audition in San Francisco, I don't fully remember what happened, but I do believe that on some level, I unconsciously self-sabotaged my ability to get to that audition. And I was 2 hours late. I sat in traffic and I didn't leave early enough and I just didn't even show up. Because of that choice, I did not get a performance role at Disney. Instead, I got placed into Disney Quest, which is a 5-story arcade in downtown Disney. It's not even in one of the parks. It has 8 virtual reality rides, 300 video games, and it's essentially where parents drop their kids off for hours on end so that they can play video games while the parents go shop and drink. It couldn't have been further away from what I wanted to do there. And they gave me one more shot after I arrived in Florida to make a change. And they're like, you can audition. We'll see what we can do. And I didn't take it. And so that was a continuing thread of this disempowered inability to take action towards my dreams. And who knows what life would have been like had I said yes to the performing arts in that way. At 34 years old now, it's actually all coming back. And I'm coming full circle and getting back into the performing arts now. But those two pivot points of not going to college and not taking the performing role at Disney, I believe set my life on a pretty crazy trajectory that I've learned and grown through tremendously, but has also fueled my passion to better equip young people to make choices that are truly authentic and aligned for them.
Okay, wow. That was a really incredible story with lots of details that I didn't know. It's so interesting how listening to you speak, and I'm probably going to elucidate my version of this in a much worse way. I realized actually there's a lots of, mirrors in my own life. Obviously not quite the same, but mirrors in a sense. And it's so interesting the way in which our parents and our environment can shape our trajectories. And also how there's a strange sense in which sometimes, so, as children, sometimes people wonder, oh, you have a baby, why are they chewing on this fork? Why are they poking these sticks? Why are they eating dirt, doing all these things? And really it's because they're trying to find agency in the world, right? They're trying a bunch of things, testing as many things as possible for as long as possible to figure out what is possible with their bodies. Like, what can I do? How far can I bend? What happens if I jump off this chair? What can I actually do in the world? And as we grow, we're still kind of like our almost entire personality is built by just bouncing around the edges. And you just, bounce off some different things, and you try some different things, you kind of like feel around and figure out, what can you do? What talents do I have? What things are possible? But then while you are doing that breaking out from the inside, there's also the outside, and how your environment or your parents, the people around you, how they can simultaneously shape what you think is possible and the directions that you end up wanting to go in. And that duality and that balance is something I find quite interesting. And similar to you in a sense, some parts might be opposite, but I was just thinking about my journey just as you were speaking. And it's funny how, I remember when I was going to school, I think there's probably one or two things. So one is reading a lot of books, which is something that I do now, and also doing like business and entrepreneurship and those kinds of things. And it's so interesting how both of those things in some ways happen by accident and in some ways just happen specifically because of the background that I had. And also that they're both things that maybe I stopped or changed the way I did for a significant period of time. And I'll explain both. So for example, with reading, it's specifically only because I think 2 reasons. One, so I actually grew up in Nigeria for a bit, and then I came to the UK and I did some of the school here and the rest of the school here. But I do remember, when I first came and I started at a new school, they had this library, and it was a wall just end to end with books, and it just seemed incredible. And I couldn't believe it was free and you could just go there and you could just pick up books. And it sounds silly, but I have that memory so viscerally in my mind. And I didn't really know what to do. I just picked a book that, someone else picked up, and those were some of the first series that I read. And I kind of started doing a bit of reading from there. But then I think we moved house at one point, and so that was probably like the end of primary school. And then I went to a secondary school, which I guess is maybe halfway between like middle school going towards high school. And the secondary school I went to was not a great school. It's not really a great school, not really a great environment overall, I would say. But it's funny. The house that we moved to was directly across the street from a library. And I used to get in trouble at school a lot. The first day of school that I had, I got into a fight, so I was in detention. What that meant is that my parents just assumed that school finished maybe and I took myself home from school. So I got home the first day of school at maybe like 5 o'clock. And so my parents just assumed this is what time school finishes. This is the time that you're going to expect me to come back from school. And what that meant is that every day after school, I baked in a whole lot of extra time, either to get into some kind of trouble, or if I'm not, running around and doing stuff, I have to find somewhere to wait until the time they're expecting me. And so sometimes if I had nothing to do, then I would just go to this library that was across the road from school, and I would just kind of wait there and hang around. So I was just thinking about that, in terms of environment, the same way that you were saying, how might life have been different if I stayed in Silicon Valley? And, it's interesting how the environment shapes us. But then simultaneously, I also remember, I started my first business type thing when I was like 13 or 14. And I remember that was something, it went quite well the first year. I think we made maybe like £6,000 or so. And then my dad shut it down. And I won't get into the whole story, but the long story short is, obviously I was 14, so you're too young to be like a legal director of a company. So I wasn't actually a director, but my dad was. And so that's how he shut it down. He did it before having the conversation with me about his idea that it's something I should shut down so I could focus on my schoolwork. We had that conversation and I kind of disagreed, and he was like, well, it's too late because I've already done it. And, and that was the end of that. And that's something I didn't really pick up again at all until much later in life. From that point, I was like, okay, then I'll just focus on school, and this is now what I'm going to do. And I kind of went on this now different path, similar to you in a sense. It's interesting how that came back around, and I was able to like rediscover that part of my life and my identity. But again, just this idea that there's a strange balance between the agency that we have as individuals, and then also the extent to which we can be shaped by the people around us and the constraints that exist in our lives.
I'm really moved by your story of starting a business at 14 that was profitable and actually working, and then your dad just shutting it down without consulting you or talking through it with you. And there's a couple missed opportunities there. Like on one level, maybe he could have still shut it down, or you guys could have decided to shut it down together, but by walking you through all the different variables that he was tracking and letting that be an empowered decision for you to say, actually, maybe he's, I agree. It is more important to focus on my studies, or to find a third door. Yes, I always am looking for yes ands, like, yes, get your schoolwork done and run this business. A 14-year-old to me is a whole human, like it's legal to start working in California at 15 and a half and drive at 16. That's not very much older. And if you are psychologically mature and emotionally mature as a 14-year-old, I just think that's a tremendous learning opportunity to run a business and see where it can go. And I've met a few kids actually over the past decade whose parents empowered them to start businesses. And it's remarkable to see the kind of people they've become by 16, 17, 18 years old. And they are young adults who are kicking ass in the world in a way that my 19-year-old can't even relate to.
Hey, we'll get back to the episode in just one moment, but I wanted to tell you very quickly about my newsletter. I started sharing everything I was learning online, and a few thousand people came along for the ride. I send 3 regular emails. Brainwave, fortnightly on a Tuesday, which is about the intersection between technology, philosophy, and psychology. Then every week on a Thursday, I send Revelations, and that's about creativity and productivity. And then finally, every other weekend, I send Wayfinder, and that's about decision making. So people in the audience actually send me really tough problems that they're working through, and I help to deconstruct them using mental models and decision making frameworks. So if you'd like to subscribe, you can join me and over 20,000 incredibly driven people at theknowledge.io. Okay, back to the episode.
So yeah, I just really felt you in that story, and I'm curious how that informed your entrepreneurial journey, which I know you're the know this is your podcast, but I am just very curious how that like shaped the future trajectory of you being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's a great question. I haven't spent, a tremendous amount of time thinking about that specifically. I would say, okay, that there's probably, I think again, going back to the analogy, like bounced around a lot between trying to figure out, okay, the things I was good at and the things that I kind of wanted to do. Because like you also mentioned, this is, touching on something you mentioned, I was also interested in art around that time as well. And I remember being very interested in art and just having all these sketchbooks and doing lots of drawing, doing lots of those kind of things. And I'm probably going to make my dad sound bad here, but, you know, similar to you, I just remember just getting this message that, oh, artists end up homeless, and if you do this, you're not going to be able to provide for your family, you're not going to have any kind of life or anything. And it's funny how, that's not necessarily something I think about all the time. However, I am interested in the extent to which, if I did think about it sufficiently, the current tension that I have in my life now between, and we'll probably get more into this later, but there's a lot of creative stuff that I specifically want to do. Some of it I'm already doing now, but there's this tension between, and actually we can talk about this now. This tension between, here's the creative work that I want to do. I primarily would call myself not work-wise, but, creative-wise, like I write fiction. And that is something that I do, and that's something I've always done. It's something I have very little time to do, and I don't do a lot. Even like work-wise, a lot of my time is mostly spent writing nonfiction because I have a newsletter. I have to send several emails a week, blah, blah. And it's so interesting how the way I've structured my life, it's almost as though, I don't know if I would call them excuses, but it's like, okay, I need either some kind of job or some business that allows me some time and freedom to do the nonfiction writing. I do the nonfiction writing to, provide some additional stability so that then I can do the fiction writing. So I'm now like 2 layers separated from the only thing that I really want to do. Like if I had all the money in the world, like the only thing I would actually want to spend my time doing, and all the layers of things that I have to do to give myself the freedom to do that thing. And some of that is very real, right? Money is real. You have to pay your bills. You have to do a lot of those things. But I do wonder the extent to which some of that is also self-limiting in a sense and kind of self-inhibiting, because hey, what would happen if I did actually step out and spend all my time doing those things? And a perfect example of that just came to mind is the fact that I think when I first started writing and publishing stuff online, at least like fiction wise, I didn't publish anything under my own name. So I was on all these like random forums and on all these writing platforms, publishing stuff, but it's not really connected to me, in name at all. And so I did that a long time ago. And then one time I decided to submit something for some writing award. And this is now 2016. So actually, it's a while ago from now, but it didn't feel a while ago, let's say before the pandemic. Okay, I submitted this short story for this writing prize. I ended up winning. And I was like, wow, that's surprising. The first time I've ever put my name on something. I win this award. I got invited to the House of Lords. They gave me this trophy. It was like incredible affair. But I didn't submit anything after that. And it was almost like there's this strange duality where even now, so I just submitted something again. So 2 things actually, just in the last few months. One was for an anthology, which I did get, which is fantastic, which is, coming out now. And then the other is for a writing prize. I'll probably find out next week if I get on the long list for that. But it's interesting how even when I was thinking about submitting for that, there was this deep internal friction in my mind where it's like, oh, I submitted for one thing before and I won. But in some ways, I don't know if that's worse than having not won, because now it's like, I could just leave that there and I will never know whether that was a fluke or not. If I submit something else and I don't win or I don't get longlisted or anything at all, then it would feel like, oh, I suck. Like, I'm not good at all. That other thing was just happenstance. It just came about one way or another. And, if you only swing once and you hit, you got 100% record. The more times you swing, if all the rest are misses, then it can feel worse and worse. And there's that sensation in the back of my mind as well, which I know makes no sense and it sounds silly even saying it, but I do recognize that there was some of that tension there.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's really a part of you that cares about being a good writer and being received as a good writer and acknowledged as that. And so getting a prize and winning, like obviously is one beautiful reflection that you're a good writer and people like what you're doing. But then the other parts of you that might still feel some imposter syndrome or just, some doubt or some concern, the part of you that's still developing as a writer might then say like, no, 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 don't get too excited about this. Like stay humble. That was probably just a fluke. And I think this is just part of the creative path where we realize that there are these conflicting parts within ourselves that have different opinions about what's actually taking place or how good things were. I'll share a story from my life recently when I published my book in 5 days on creative dysregulation. So this is a very meta topic because I think what you're describing is kind of a flavor of creative dysregulation. The day I published the book, it went live on Kindle. I was in a 10-day meditation retreat. So it actually went live the first day of the meditation retreat after I took my vow of technological celibacy. And I broke that to come out and just be like, when is it going to be live so I can send the newsletter? So then it went live, sent the newsletter, and then put away all my technology. And I went into this 10-day retreat. And as I sat there in meditation, kind of meditation for those 10 days, I noticed these very antagonistic parts inside of me. One voice said, "You're an idiot. Like, who publishes a book in 5 days? You're the laughing stock of authors and no one's ever going to take you seriously. And this book isn't even good. And like, who do you think you are to have done something like this?" And then another voice saying, "I bet when I get out of my retreat, there's going to be $1 million book offer in my inbox because this story is so epic and so great." Because I was in a meditation retreat, I couldn't take action at all. So I just sat there and witnessed these different energies inside of myself and was able to distance from both and just say like, those are here. I did a thing and this is the aftermath of doing a thing or hearing all these different parts inside of us, some of which are very wounded. I would say both of those opinions come from a wounded place, and just got to help integrate those different parts so that I could come back out and actually meet what was the reality, which was neither of those things were true. It was a cool launch. People liked it. It was well received. No publishing offer in my inbox. It was just like, it was just good. Everything was good. And I think what like I've been working on is every time I ship something out into the world, even if it's super well received or not, I just am like, I did a thing, keep going. I did a thing, keep going. Like, just keep going. Just keep producing, keep writing, keep shipping, keep sharing. There's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's essentially like, your job is to just focus on doing the work. You have no ownership of the fruits of your work. And I've really been liking that because I can see when my ego gets all wrapped up in the sales or the likes or the publicity, and that takes me away from creating, which is ultimately what I'm here to do.
I actually wanted to double click on two questions. One is, your mom telling you not to go to college and to go to junior college, was the only reason just because that she happened to go to junior college, or was there some other reason? And then I'm interested in, you went to 7 colleges, and that tells me two things without knowing any of the details. One is that sounds like there's a lot going on and perhaps, hey, life is happening. There's loads of different things happening in your life, but also that you are incredibly determined to do this one thing. And so I'm really interested in like either what was it that you wanted, or what were you driving at? Because remember, simultaneously, you're winning these entrepreneurship awards, you're winning money, you're trying to do that side of life as well. And was there specifically something that you were aiming for? Because I think, it's funny. I think about it now when I see some people maybe on Twitter sometimes, or in general in life. I think very often there are people that are trying to figure themselves out, and they don't realize that they're trying to figure themselves out, and they feel like they just have a strong sense of conviction about whatever the thing is that they're doing, but they're trying a lot of different things, and everyone else can see, okay, this person's just, figuring some stuff out. Maybe he doesn't realize it yet, but he's going to realize it eventually. And, I'm interested to know, because I think you mentioned before that, hey, there was this period during your 20s where you were still trying to, figure life out and figure yourself out. Did it feel like that at the time, or did it feel like, hey, I know exactly the thing that I'm trying to do, and this is exactly what I'm doing?
Yeah, what a great question. So I'll go back. So my mom, I don't fully know her reason. It's a very tender topic. We don't talk about it yet, but I think, for one thing, I graduated in high school in 2007. So it was right around the financial collapse. However, the decision to not go to college happened, I think, like 2 years prior, a year and a half prior to that. But that was my mom's path. She didn't really understand anything other than her own path. And the money just wasn't there. And so there's this kind of black and white thinking of college is expensive, money's not there, we can't go. Versus, wow, my daughter has thrived in school since she was 4. There is a very high likelihood that we could get a very strong scholarship, if not a full ride scholarship, if we just applied ourselves and got really clear. And so that wasn't my mom's way of thinking, which is unfortunate. I wish that I had one of the main things I wish that I had and that I missed and that I want every young person to have is mentorship and guidance from strong, healthy, embodied, thriving adults. And I think it's rare to find adults that really fit that bill. But because we're not, this gets into a whole nother conversation around parenting and just kind of like lack of rites of passage and initiation and like maturing, the right steps that we all need to take to mature. Because nobody was in my corner helping me navigate, I kept making all these decisions as I was figuring myself out. So the going to 7 colleges thing, well, it was just me, myself, and I figuring out what I'm doing with my life. Basically, I hit 18 and my mom's like, good luck. So I'm like, okay. Right. And so I'm like, oh, I'm a waitress. I'm going to date this older man and I'm going to figure some shit out. And I just got a very intense crash course on learning how to listen to that inner pull, that inner tug towards whatever the next thing is. And I think I am an extreme case of being a multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate kind of person. So for me to figure myself out, I've had to go drink water from lots of different sources. And that is still very much a part of me. My husband jokes that he's married to 10 women. And I have a lot of Gemini in my chart. There's just a lot of different aspects of me, more than the average person, I would argue. And my friends would probably corroborate that too. Kelly is a lot. I have a lot going on. And so those 7 colleges were also me following all the different interests that were arising. So I studied graphic design and advertising, sustainability, entrepreneurship, outdoor adventure leadership, hospitality, and just kept being like, well, this is the next thing that feels good and interesting because I am a voracious learner. And I wasn't quite tracking like how expensive going to 7 colleges was accumulating into. And I didn't have a lot of financial like wherewithal at the time to kind of like try and narrow it in. But I just kept following my curiosities. Still do that today. I love that about myself. I love that about early 20s Kelly. I was so lost and so wandery. But because of that, I broke out of the default paradigms really fast. And so after Disney, I went to Vail, Colorado, and for 3 years, I was like an avid outdoors woman, snowboarding, mountain climbing, ice climbing. I bashed my 2 front teeth out twice, rafting, camping. Like it was super cool. But then at some point I was like, I'm not going to spend my whole life doing this. Now I need to go back to college. And that's when the whole like moving to Lake Tahoe thing kind of stirred up. And ultimately, we are all just figuring out who we are based on these decisions that we make. And I think one of the gifts, it's a double-edged sword, but I do see it as a gift that I have is when something doesn't feel right anymore, I'm willing to hop and leave it. Now, my stance on that has changed now because I'm in a marriage. I'm committed to my business. So if something doesn't feel right now, I actually lean in and do all the unearthing and the work to kind of figure out what is happening here. But back then, I just kept moving forward. I just kept rolling with the impulses. And it was painful at times and it was chaotic. And, from the outside in, people are like, Kelly is crazy. This woman the girl does not know how to make decisions and choices. But no one taught me how to make decisions and choices for myself. Had I been taught how to do that, then I would have stood up for myself at the end of my high school time and gotten into a college had I known how to check in with myself. So I had a long, weird journey of learning how to make my own empowered, healthy decisions. And now I know, I'm going to be a mom's in the next couple of years. And the thing I'm going to be hyper fixated on, probably to an extreme unhealthy stance, is do my children know who they are and do they feel empowered to be themselves? Like, I'm going to be tracking that so hard because to me, it's one of the most fundamental things we need for this world, but as individuals.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do stay tuned for more. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps the podcast. And follow me on Twitter. Feel free to shoot me any thoughts. See you next time.